Hello and welcome to my Yu-Gi-Oh channel. Like the video if you enjoy it and don't forget to subscribe. Today we're looking at Duel Links, which is the new mini box for the series, and it's going to be covering Arena of Sanctuary. We're actually going to be looking at the secret rares. These are a little bit easier to get than the ultra rares, but they're still quite difficult. And my opinion of them is actually, I think they're a little bit better than the ultra rares. So the first card is Exploder Dragonwing. This is a Dark Dragon Synchro effect monster. It's a level 7 with 2,400 attack and 1,600 defense. It requires 1 tuner plus 1 or more non-tuner dragon type monsters, and the effect is at the start of the damage step. If this card battles a monster, you can destroy that monster, and if you do, inflict damage to your opponent equal to the attack of the destroyed monster had on the field. This card's attack must be greater than or equal to the attack of that monster to activate and to resolve this effect. So my opinion of this is actually this is an incredible card. Yes, this card actually has to be more powerful, so technically you could just run over it by battle, but why would you risk that? The thing is, you're more likely to burn them for more effect damage than you are with just running them over battle, unless their attack points are lower than 1,200. Otherwise, this effect is a great way of removing some cards. The other thing is, some of the monsters do float if they're destroyed by battle, so by destroying them by card effects, you're actually getting rid of them before they can actually do anything, or at least prevent them from kind of extending into their combos any further. This card has been used within Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds. It was a card used by Jack Atlas. Not very much. It was used in a handful of duels, especially since Jack Atlas was still running his Red Dragon Archfiend from the beginning of the series. Even when you see the duels between him and Yusei at the beginning, he was still running that card. So it is viable, but my only issue is it does have outs. You could easily get rid of this by any spell or trap effect that can just destroy. And the other thing is it does require you to be running dragon type monsters. So unless you're prepared to build either a pure build dragon type deck or one that consists of enough that you can guarantee drawing into the cards, it's not worth running within the extra deck, especially since you've got a limited slot of 6 spaces. The next card we're covering is Valkyrie Sigrun. I briefly mentioned this as one of the key monsters and boss monsters of the Valkyrie archetype, and I have loved using Valkyries. I think they're a really good underestimated archetype, and I can actually see them having some level of competition and competitive nature within Duel Links. It's a light fairy level 9. It's got 2,200 attack and 2,400 defense. And its effect is, if this card is in your hand, you can target one face-up spell or trap card you control, send it to the graveyard, and if you do, special summon this card. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can special summon one level 8 or lower Valkyrie monster from your hand or graveyard, and you can only use each effect of Valkyrie Sigrun once per turn. With this card, I have been running only one of because I don't want to brick my hand, but I have been pairing it with cards such as Mage Power, United We Stand, Power of the Guardians, things that I've mentioned before. The reason I've done this is because it's actually a bit more versatile. Of course, it can be special summoned by other cards, but I've found these cards are actually the most useful to use because what you can do is, if you don't have any face-up monsters or you just don't want to be risking to run any in case your opponent has a response, you could always just equip your Power of the Guardian, Mage Power, United We Stand to an opponent's monster, and since you've got a face-up card, you can just send that to the graveyard. They no longer get the stat boost from those effects or the protection that those cards give. Just to special summon this. It does have slightly higher defense than attack, so there have been times where I've been a little concerned about what my opponent has run into. There is that wall card, which actually makes you lose 800 attack points for each monster you control. So often I will actually just put this in defense mode, and I will actually special summon. There's 3 targets that I look at. There's Shecht, which is the one that it's the level 1, which each turn you can discard 2 cards from your opponent's deck, the top of their deck. I do that because that has another effect where if it's summoned by the effect of Valkyrie, it can then special summon another monster. So usually I will then off that special summon Urda, or I will, if I've got Urda in the graveyard or in the hand, I will just go straight into Urda if I can. Whereas alternatively, I do use Viet, which is the level 3 monster. And the reason I do that is if they've got an attack position monster, I will crash into that. If I don't have Urda, to special summon into Urda. That's the real reason. It helps to speed up the deck. It makes it a lot more consistent. And of course, running those cards together, that's kind of the general pattern you want to achieve when running this archetype. So the next card we've got is Valkyrie Sigrun. This is a light fairy type, level 1 with 0 attack and 2000 defense. And the effect is, if this card is special summoned, you can special summon 1 Valkyrie monster from your deck, except a copy of itself. During your main phase, you can send the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck to the graveyard. You can only use each effect of Valkyrie Sigrun once per turn. This is the card that I mentioned, which pairs really well with Sigrun, because Sigrun will instantly special summon this, or Viet can special summon this, and then you can actually go into another card. So essentially you can get your whole field full if you want to. The kind of other benefit of this card is being able to send 2 cards of your opponent's deck to the graveyard. If they're running the minimum, say, 20 cards, you could easily kind of deck them out. The downside of doing this is if it's a deck that's kind of heavily graveyard reliant, I would say this is a card you don't want to be facing or using the effect of if you're running against an opponent's Blue Eyes White Dragon or Dark Magician deck, because sending those cards to the graveyard in a Blue Eyes deck, that could be an ancient, I think there's an ancient stone, there's the White Stone of Legend, and there's the ancient stone as well, which can either search the Blue Eyes or special summon the Blue Eyes directly to the field. That's a big no-no. You do not want to be doing that. Essentially, also, you could just end up pitching one of their Dark Magicians, and then they'll be able to recover it somehow with one of their cards. In those matches, it's quite bad, but in matches where, you know, your opponent cannot really rely on the graveyard, or the cards they have, say, their spell and trap support doesn't have anything that can access the graveyard, it's an amazing effect to have. Deck out is still not that viable. I know you've got Robin Zombie that's out, but generally doing that, and I know you've got Dark Scorpions that have that kind of effect as well. Cliff the Trap Remover sends 2 cards every time it does battle damage. But other than that, I don't see it being that viable as an option for the moment. Might do a little bit in the future, but we'll have to wait and see. The next card is Arcana Force X. It's the Dark Ruler. This is a light fairy level 10 with 4000 attack and 4000 defense. And the effect is, it cannot be normal summoned or set. It must be special summoned from your hand by sending 3 monsters you control to the graveyard, and cannot be special summoned by other ways. When this card is special summoned, toss a coin and gain the appropriate effect. Heads, this card can make a second attack during each battle phase, but if it does so using this effect, change it to defense position at the end of the battle phase. Its battle position cannot be changed until the end of your next turn. And tails, if this card is destroyed, destroy all cards on the field. I can understand why they've introduced this card, considering that Sartorius and his Arcana support has been massively put into Duel Links. So having one of its boss monsters, you know, makes a bit of sense. It's a fairy, so it does synergize well with the Valkyrie monsters. And of course, I've already mentioned the combo that you can have 3 monsters already on your field with the Valkyrie archetype ready to go in order to bring this out. The good thing about having the ability to attack twice in the turn, if it gets heads, Of course, you can guarantee heads if you've got the field spell and it actually light barrier actually goes your way. If it gets a heads, and then you can automatically guarantee all your coin flips for that turn are heads. The kind of downside is once it goes, it basically uses up its attacks within a turn, because you essentially take that attack that you would do the next turn and you just move it forward one turn. As this can't be changed, its battle position cannot be changed until the end of your next turn. I suppose there is an out in if you can change its battle mode with spell or trap, but other than that, that might be a bit too clunky for what the deck wants to achieve. The better effect, I think, is Tails, because if it's destroyed, you get to just wipe out all cards on the field. This could be devastating to you if you've got the advantage, but if you know you've drawn Tails, I don't think you'd be setting many cards, and I think you'd want to just try and tempt your opponent into getting rid of this card, just so that they kind of suffer a little bit more. This card is quite useful as a one-off, but I really wouldn't run more than that. It could be very clunky if you draw into multiple. Also, the 4,000 attack and defense balance means your opponent isn't going to get over this very easily. Yes, they probably can get rid of it, but it's just not going to be... They're going to need certain cards in order to do that very well. So the next card is Triamine Sphinx. This is an Earth Rock level 10 with 2,500 attack and 2,500 defense. Its effect is it cannot be normal summoned or set. It must be special summoned with the effect of a Triamid card and cannot be special summoned by other ways. If a face-up Triamid card you control, except Triamine Sphinx, is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon this card from your hand. While you control another Triamid card, this card gains 500 attack and defense for each field spell card with a different name in your graveyard. Also, monsters your opponent controls cannot attack except to attack Triamine Sphinx. Okay, so I have a little story about this. I did actually play against a Triamid player, and I was using the Valkyries at the time. The massive downside of this card is it makes itself the attack target. And of course, you know, I think the Triamids have like 3 or 4 field spells. If you can get those in the graveyard, good. That this card could become a 4,000 attack monster. Yeah, 4,000 attack and defense. But if you're using it against a deck that banishes, for example, that's just exactly what the Valkyries do, you're not going to do very well against that matchup. I can give you an example. I have found as an interesting tech of not running more than one, but I do run one soul release. And the reason for that is they all get kind of like... There's a couple of them that either gain a boost from having monsters banished, or they provide a boost to your Valkyrie monsters for each monster that is banished. So by running Soul Release, what you can do is you can control which cards are being banished. If your opponent has multiple cards, you can actually choose what you want. In this case, I actually banished all of his field spell cards, which means this was just a 2,500 attack monster. I was able to actually get rid of it with the spell card, which actually removes it from the field, and then I was easily able to out the rest of his monsters. It really is not difficult to get rid of if you're going to do that. Although saying that, Triamids do benefit from being able to actually trigger and activate their other field spells multiple times in a turn, which I find is incredibly annoying. But there are so many ways to out this, it's unbelievable. Even if you look at something like, I don't know, Ancient Gear monsters, they react a lot better than this deck does, because they do focus on a beat stick kind of mentality as well. If I've got the strongest monster, I can win. That type of mentality, which is all good and well, but that doesn't really work for this. There wasn't enough support to justify this. With the Ancient Gears, they did have the initial starting support at the start of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, and they also got more support down the line with, I think it was Yu-Gi-Oh! Arc 5. When they had to face the Obelisk Force, they were all using Ancient Gear monsters. There was also support somewhere in the line with Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds as well. There was the big fusion monster, the ultimate Ancient Gear monsters as well, and who knows, we might actually see the introduction of maybe that Chaos Giant monster and maybe some other support down the line if they plan to introduce that into Duel Links. We'll have to wait and see on that, but definitely if that gets that kind of support, this archetype is just going to be completely forgotten. For one reason is just like Ancient Gears work on trying to destroy both their own cards as well as your opponents. So if they can double cyclone their, Ancient Gear Fortress and your own field spell, they're much better for it. And they've got various cards which actually prevent effects from activating, which actually means they're overall a better Earth attribute deck if you want to run that style of deck. So the next card is Nova Summoner. This is a light attribute fairy type level 4 with 1400 attack and 800 defense. The effect is when this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon one light fairy type monster with 1500 or less attack from your deck. If the Sanctuary in the Sky is face up on the field, you can special summon one Air Knight Parshath instead. I do find it a little unusual that this card was introduced in this set as opposed to other sets which have supported fairy types a little bit more, saying that it could still be used within a Valkyrie deck as they're all fairy types anyway. So that's fine. I don't have any issues with that. The whole idea of being able to actually special summon is you can go into a lot of your monsters very easily. It's just a nice utility card. It's a bit like Shining Angel as well, with the added bonus that if you have the Sanctuary in the Sky, you're able to go into your Air Knight Parshath. The only downside I would see to this card is it's not particularly strong, and if your opponent is able to just banish this card, as I've mentioned in the past, or with things like Karma Cut or Dimension Prison, or just negate the effect in some way, then this is just a 1400 body which can easily be overridden. The next card is Scrapyard. This is a normal spell card with the effect add one Scrap Tuner monster from your deck to your hand. I don't really have too much of an opinion on this card, although it just acts as a rotor for the Scrap archetype. It's only focused on the tuners, but if you've got the relevant cards on the field, then it just makes your job that much easier. Scrap Dragon is a pain to out, considering that it gets rid of one of your opponent's cards and one of your cards, which means, at best, you're losing cards which you might have been able to use if it had just gone in for its attack. So it's a good way of just general removal. So the next card is Combination Attack. This is a quick play spell card. With the effect, during a battle phase, you can use this effect on one monster that has attacked this turn and is equipped with a Union monster. Change the Union monster back to a monster in face-up attack or defense position. Also, the monster that was equipped with the Union monster may attack again this turn. I really don't have much of an opinion on this one. It's not that viable. I know you've got the V to Z Dragon Catapult cards that can maybe use this. I do see that you've got the Burning Beast and the Freezing Beast. Those are two cards which are in kind of like the picture on this card, so that's an idea of what can be used. But generally, it's not viable, and unless they introduce some really powerful Union monsters, it's a forgotten card within this set. Trust me, I would not run this for love nor money. The next card is Karakuri Cashing. It's a normal trap card with the effect target one Karakuri monster you control and one effect monster your opponent controls. Change the battle position of your monster, and if you do, negate the effects of that opponent's monster until the end of this turn. If you control a Karakuri monster, you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target one face-up monster on the field. Change that monster's battle position. You can only activate one Karakuri Cash-In per turn. So the whole idea of this is you're able to manipulate the battle position of the monster and to be able to shut down its effects. Depending on what those are, that could be beneficial, but obviously changing the battle positions, if you've got certain Karakuris, for example, one of the boss monsters, every time a battle position is changed, you get to draw a card. That's always beneficial, so that actually replaces this trap card. The other thing is it actually does this twice, so it has the graveyard effect, which essentially does the same without negating the effects of that opponent's monster. So you can actually manipulate your opponent a little bit more. I do see it as being necessary for the deck, and I would consider running 2 of it. I didn't actually experience it in the duel I was facing a Karakuri player in. I think I discarded all their copies from the deck using a Shecht, which is why it wasn't used in response to me. But I would imagine it is a very annoying card to out, especially since some of the effects of my Valkyrie monsters are literally on summon. So if they get shut down, I'm not getting them back. And the final card we have for the secret rares is Karma Cut. This is a normal trap card with the effect discard 1 card, then target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls. Banish that target, then banish all cards with the same name as that monster from your opponent's graveyard. Okay, so I don't actually I would admit to not really using the second part of the effect, because unless your opponent has multiple of those cards in the graveyard already, it's not going to do anything. It's an additional effect, yes, but I don't see it being useful as of now. There are certain cards which can protect themselves from either battle or effects, or are incredibly beefy, and that means that they're difficult to run over. I found this as an amazing out to many of those cards. Of course, this is quite susceptible as well. Whilst it can flexibly activate if your opponent uses something like Double Cyclone to get rid of this card, you can just chain this and get rid of one of their cards. So you can actually force them to waste their card. The kind of disadvantage I would say of this card is if your opponent is running a banish-based decks, or also the discard cost. If you can't really afford the cost, it's a massive problem. In certain decks like Valkyries, this card is needing to be run, and I can see its importance and how it works as a better out than a lot of cards, as it can be activated practically any time your opponent has a face-up monster. That's the only condition it has. So what do you guys think of these cards? Is there anything amazing in here that you love? Or is there anything in particular you hate? For me, I love this Karma Cut. I love a couple of other cards in here. I think they're all quite decent. I do like the Valkyries, but I do see certain cards like that Sphinx being very easily forgotten about and just an addition within the deck for whatever reason. Who knows whether they'll see play. If you have worked out how to kind of break those or make them better than they were, let me know down below in the comments whatever you think. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe.